Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is Nurul. I am Binti Ainurizam with the matrix number of 272559, and I will be presenting with a topic for my group, which is group 5, that titles the effect of COVID-19 pandemic towards small and medium enterprises in local and global financial institutions. So, the main agenda for this presentation is we will be discussing on the introduction, literature review, example of affected SMEs during COVID-19, the methodology, the effects of COVID-19 pandemic towards SMEs, the comparison between local and global effects, results and data analysis, and last but not least is we will be concluding with the conclusion. For the introduction, the pandemic has an even impact not just on the health sector, but also on all aspects of life, including the global economy, social and cultural activities. So the pandemic crisis was notable for its unforeseeable duration as well as its effects on several economic sectors. So it has resulted in the worst recession in history as well as the financial crisis. So, however, the pandemic has a severe influence on the global and local economy sectors, enterprises and SMEs. This epidemic has mostly impacted on the small and medium enterprises who have been impacted on both the supply and demand sides of the economy. Since they are relying on supply chains, they are disrupted owing to the increased raw material delays and a decline in client purchasing and demand. So, based on those limitations, half of all businesses anticipate to close within the next month. So, this irreversible closure of small businesses results in a loss of intangible capital, skills, and innovative ability, potentially locking countries into prolonged recession long after the pandemic has ended. As for the next part is the literature review. So in this part, we will take a look on the articles and journals that have been written based on the research to study about this issue. So, the response and strategies towards the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on small and medium enterprises in financial institutions, where we will be discussed on 4 articles and journals. Firstly is by Nawal Abdullah, Adam and Ghadah Al-Larifi 2021. So this article studies about the innovation practices for survival of small and medium enterprises SMEs in the COVID-19 time. So this article assists us on the innovative implementation of new solutions to SMEs difficulties during the COVID-19, such as effective implementation of new innovation related to the organization products, the services or procedures, new marketing techniques or innovative administrative procedures for improved work and performance. Therefore, the government's institutions and various agencies should provide SMEs with external support during the COVID-19 era in order to save them, accelerate their growth, to foster their innovation and to improve their capabilities by boosting up their managerial abilities. And it is important to enhance their marketing skills and to ensure they have a greater economic impact on the country. Secondly, the next article of helping SMEs rise to challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic by Dr. Negin Vergvi and Yap Jo Yi 2021. So, the author assists us in gaining insight further into how the SMEs enterprise will survive this crisis by digital transformation. So the author has mentioned that the government and the society need to keep encouraging the small and medium-sized enterprises, which is the SMEs, to innovate, enhance connection and digitization processes, and to expand into new markets, since they are critical to the country's economic rebuilding. Thirdly, the article that can be related to this topic is Survival Strategies of SMEs amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, application of SEM and FSQCA by Muhammad Sabir Rahman, Fadi Abdul Munim Abdul Fattah. This article mentioned that despite the fact that the epidemic has created an impossibly challenging condition for SMEs and their employees, the firm still needs to treat their employees better than necessary, as this pandemic has severely impacted the wellness issues of all the employees. So therefore, businesses should hire professional employees to support the inner and outer cores and manage them in such a way that employees are comfortable with management decisions. And last but not least is the survival and sustainability strategies of small and medium enterprises, which is the SMEs, during and after COVID-19 pandemic by Naila Najiha and Devi Parmatasari, 2021. According to this article, it is critical to ensure that the sustainability of businesses during these difficult times, particularly those that are vulnerable and operate in the informal sector. So even once the crisis has passed, the economy cannot be expected to return to normal form overnight. So as a result, in order to survive and compete better, the firm must be able to reinforce its existence. So a defensive plan and business sustainability are critical and important for all SMEs to compete in their industry during and after the pandemic crisis. Next, as for the example of affected SMEs during COVID-19, so some small business may close as a result of changed consumer behavior, particularly the physical separation and enforced operational limits that occurred. And there are other small firms that may close because their finances were already in jeopardy before the crisis. So, small firms employed over half of all private sector workers before the financial crisis. So, widespread business exists cause more long-term unemployment and economic damage than short closures. Therefore, it's crucial to know which small business will close permanently. So this insight can assist business leaders and policymakers in developing actions to protect small enterprises in the short term, secure their participation in the recovery, and put more of them on a more robust footing in the years ahead. So, the severity of the struggle small firms confront in the initial few months of the crisis can be better understood by determining each sector's level of immediate risk. So, small business owners surveys assisted us in generating a range of estimations. So, according to these owners, 50% of small firms facing a major negative effect from COVID-19 that may be vulnerable to closure. So at the other end of the spectrum, a quarter of small enterprises could face closure due to a moderate negative effect of their business. So the following charts above shows the small business vulnerable state in handling COVID-19 impact that are close to take a permanent closure of their business. And accommodation and food service sector is seen as the most vulnerable out of all sectors, which what worries us the most because it is one of the most important sector in all over the countries. As for the methodology, as for the local which is in Malaysia, these studies researchers use a combination of interview and survey techniques to compile their findings. So the information that was gathered over the course of 2 months specifically, which is on July 2020 and August 2020. There were 3 distinct sections to the questionnaire. So part 1 of the questionnaire was made to learn more about the Malaysian SMEs and their history. So in the second section of the survey, we asked about the role that SMEs played during the COVID-19 disaster. So the third phase involved discovering whether or not small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, benefited from the stimulus package, and if so, whether or not they shifted to a new distribution channel such as the internet, which is digitalizations, to stay afloat in their business. So Google Forms was used for this survey distribution and administrations. As for the interview questions, due to the data collection occurred over the course of 2 distinct time periods, the vast majority of SMEs were up and running again by the end of the first phase, from July 15, 2020 to July 31, 2020. The responses were collected via online survey amounting of 300 surveys that were submitted via email, WhatsApp and Telegram. Furthermore, the majority of the respondents is 31.4% were men who ran their business as sole proprietorship, while for the partnership is 31.4%, both male and female owners. For sole proprietorship, 19.6% are women, and partnership, 17.6% are men. So nearly half of all SMEs are engaged in some aspect of the service industry. This is followed by those engaged in retail, which is 33.3%, manufacturing, and wholesale and construction, which is the remaining of 3.5%. As for the global effects, so in understanding the effects of COVID-19 pandemic towards small and medium enterprises globally, our group chooses and use the secondary data, which we refer to the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship. So, according to the surveys, SMEs are feeling the effects of the crisis to a greater extent, and there are so many SMEs out there that are concerned about going out of business in the coming months. 79% of small businesses are either fully or slightly open. So the impact of COVID-19 continues to worry many small companies, which is at 82%, but the percentage of those who are very concerned has decreased from 53% in early May to 43%, and early June 47%, which anticipate higher revenue in 2021, and 56%, up from 48% in May, are comfortable with their company's cash flow situation, which is not very good in this situation. Next, we will be discussing about the effects on the local, which is in Malaysia. So this study aims to clarify the impact of COVID-19 infection on Malaysian SMEs. So for the data collection, this study used an online survey system with self-administered questionnaires shared nationwide via social media. So the result shows that the COVID-19 epidemic in Malaysia has a significant impact on the businesses of SMEs, affecting nearly 60% of the small business, 64% of the micro businesses, and 51% of medium businesses. So the two factors that have caused business owners to lose profit are debt to suppliers due to the product disruption, or the inability to sell, and the business is not functioning due to the inventory shortages. So the first one is the reduction in sales profit. So most SMEs have little working capital, so which means that their financial management would suffer if they do not have a cash flow from ongoing economic activity. So smaller businesses defined as those with a liability of smallness, so they are more sensitive to internal and external events because they have less control resources. So in the COVID-19 containment policy, which entails the complete shutdown of businesses operations, so emphasizing social distancing between employees and minimizing physical contact between their customers is one of the conditions that could affect the small businesses, particularly SMEs that uses contact to run their business in the MCO period. For the second one is the shortage of cash flow to survive. So a business cash flow is different from business profit. Businesses need cash flow to survive, not profit. So a business that suffers from a poor cash flow shows slightly at an early stage of getting total closure. Since cash is crucial to repay loans, payment disbursement, paying suppliers, and paying their employees. Furthermore, we also found that the majority of them are taking alternative actions in regards to their business operation, which include by persuading their staff to utilize annual leave, as well as initiating retrenchment of their employees, which is to survive their business. Thirdly is the outdated marketing strategy. So, a small number of SMEs are unable to engage physically with customers because they are relying on traditional marketing strategies such as printing advertisement in newspapers or magazines, mailing flyers to the customers, mailboxes, and using commercial on televisions, even in the radio or billboards, which were not very effective during the MCO period. So as a result, SMEs must consider to use the digital technologies both during the epidemic and in the future to ensure their survival in their business. And last but not least is the unstable market demand. So This is the greatest difficulty for the businesses has been in the drop in demand. So revenues have decreased as a result of the fall in orders. The lack of money in businesses is particularly troublesome. So to deal with this issue, the majority of businesses have reduced their operational expenses. And furthermore, while businesses have sought extra loans to compensate for cash flow shortages, the difficulty in securing such loans has worsened their condition in this situation. And as for globally, as you can see from the chart, we can see that 34% out 100% are strongly affected due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 29% are moderately affected, and 26% are slightly affected, and 11% are not affected. So the effects on global is firstly is the changes in supply and demand. SMEs companies experience a reduction in the supply labor. This is because of the government's restrictions to implement the MCO, where people cannot go out to work and cannot go anywhere. So due to the pandemic, citizens choose their health and safety compared to work. This is because their health is the most important at that time. So they feel more vigilant and cautious because they are not confident with the current situation. So while in the demand, SMEs companies experience a sharp fall. So this is because purchasing power also falls at that point. So people prefer to save their money because they do not know what's going to happen in the future because of this pandemic. The second one is cost increase but sales decrease. So as China embarked on the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, Malaysia has imposed restrictions on the country's inbound routes for all matters including trade and purchase. So this is to reduce the spread of the virus. And because of this, many SMEs companies have to wait for the influx of supplies from foreign countries. And it will result in a reduction in sales where the goods did not sell out. And people do not want to buy because things are getting expensive and they don't need them at that point. And it will affect SMEs somehow to survive in this COVID-19 situation. For the third one is the low economic activity due to the lockdown. At the beginning of the reopening of the company after the lockdown, businesses' operation were a bit slow as people were still afraid to buy and maintaining their social distancing. So this also affects the company's business's operation where the company does not have enough capital to roll back and not enough revenue to pay off debts. And therefore, the SMEs companies needed to borrow funds to recover their expenses and rolling their capital. Next, to compare between locally and globally, first one, we compare it with the sales and revenues of SMEs. So more than half of the SMEs claim that despite the difficult circumstances, they could only survive for 1 to 2 months if their staff took unpaid or reduced pay leave. So only a small number of enterprises claim they could survive for longer than 6 months, while 1/4 of them thought they could survive for 3 to 6 months. So the SMEs emphasizes that their three main problems were paying their employees' salaries, experiencing a loss of businesses during the MCO period, and paying their rent. So in its COVID-19 business impact survey, in the International Trade Center ITC found that more than half of SMEs experience significantly income losses globally. So if no additional support is given, 1/3 of the respondents worry that they may go out of business within a month, and up to 50% say they will have to close down within 3 months. Secondly is the supply and demand. Most economic sectors experience negative growth on the supply side, and while most expenditure subcomponents experience declines, and the international border closures and limitation on local interstate migration had a significant negative impact on the international commerce activity. Next is digitalization of SMEs. So the government is addressing digitalization strategically, working in partnership with the private sector to encourage the individuals to become digital, and to support SMEs by giving the grants and other financial aid. And as a result, SMEs gain from electronic payments and increase the number of customers they can access online. So, in the early months of the lockdown, many physical enterprises were constrained, but technology and digitalization have made it possible for online activity to continue. So, digitalization has played a crucial role in SME company activities, as well as in boosting economic resilience and also compared in all countries globally. And last but not least is the risk management of SMEs finance. Numerous nations have created alternatives to assist the SME sector's operations through direct funding, tax breaks, financial guarantees, and low interest loans. And during the pandemic, the Polish government gradually enacted a number of initiatives to help the national economy in an effort to reduce individual risk connected to business activity. And as for our country, Malaysia, the government has announced a number of economic programs to secure the survival and well-being of the companies that have suffered as a result of the subsequent containment measures. As for result and data analysis, according to the OECD data, there is above average SME presence in sectors primarily affected by the crisis, which include transportation, manufacturing, construction, wholesale and retail commerce. And other than that, micro enterprises have a strong representation in the impacted industries in various OECD nations. So in Malaysia, small and medium enterprises expect no cash inflow for at least 3 months due to the nation's ongoing movement control order to curb the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thus, most SMEs are very tight in cash flow, and it is expected that there will be no cash inflow for at least 3 months during the MCO period. Yet, SMEs will still need to continue paying their full salary, like their rentals and some statutory payments. And at last, the economic uncertainty for the next 6 months will burden the repayment capability, and they risk going under bankruptcy. 4% out of 22.5% that have applied for the loan have been rejected by the banks. As for the conclusion, this study purpose is to seek what are the impacts and the thoughts of the SMEs reacting with the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic that were affecting the market locally and globally. So this study was carried out by interview sessions and by survey methods in order to gather the collection of the data and findings. The COVID-19 pandemic will affect the SMEs as it portrays the activities in various sorts of management and business enterprises that were involving sole proprietorship and partnerships. So the effects that were affected will be counted in several ways in terms of locally and globally that were mentioned in my presentation. And that's all from me. Thank you.